Well, a very pleasant good evening to everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Second and Saints. I'm John Hendricks alongside Ross Jackson. We are cooling down from earlier, Ross. It was quite the hot outside, is what I would tell you. For today.
No hot?
Yeah, no hot. That's exactly what I'm going to call
hot?
it. But yes, sir. But man, how you doing this evening?
Good, man. Good. It was an exciting day. I'm always like jazzed and energized after simply like being able to be out there for football happening. You know what I mean?
For sure.
So I'm all about it, man. I'm all about it. How you holding up?
Yeah, man, just cooling down a little bit, and so I think we got some storm rain stuff coming through, so that'll be fun.
Yeah, I heard like a little bit of thunder. I was like,
so as long as we're not outside playing in it, we'll be okay. But hey guys, we're doing this live. We don't know what's gonna happen. We'll just roll with it. That's all we can do, man. So I'm glad to hear you doing well, and obviously we know why we're here. We're talking about Saints OTAs, talking about our notes and observations. Tons of them today. Tons. I mean,
man.
For those who don't know, we only get one practice that we see every single week. So there's 3 weeks of these OTAs, and then we'll get one more look at the Saints, and then it's a mandatory minicamp from June 11th through the 13th. I might have said that wrong in a previous episode because I was thinking of
I think we
said
10th through the 13th.
Yeah, something like that.
That's all that it was. But yeah, it's
11. So and we'll be there for that. But OTAs, we get to see the one, and I mean, it's jam-packed with information. I mean, that's all I can say. And if you haven't checked out, Ross put up some notes. We're going to talk about the undrafted free agents. A lot of rookies made some really good flashes today, and so I'm really excited about that. Veterans looking pretty good. Some of DeMario's comments, Trevor Penning. There's tons to talk about, but let's start here with the unfortunate news, right? We learned today that Tano Passignon, he has a torn Achilles. He tore it in the offseason. And so it's not he's not going to be available this season, but he's not going to be ready for training camp. He's not going to be ready for week 1. And he might return some point later in the season. Unfortunate blow for a guy who is a big part of, the Saints pass rush, sub rush on when they go 3-man fronts. Second on defensive ends last year behind Carl Granderson. I mean, this is a guy that it's going to hurt losing him, but others are going to have to step up. Your take.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, first of all, really, really unfortunate. We saw this happen with Noah Spence years ago too, like getting ready for the getting ready for the offseason training programs and all these other things. And then unfortunately having that happen. I think the thing that I want to make sure that people know is that these guys, even when they're not at the facility and they're not at OTAs, they're not at mini camps, and there's kind of that dark, I would call it from theater, I would call it like the dark period or whatever. It's where like everything's just kind of not happening at the facility or at the venue. These guys are still working. They're out there working with their trainers. They're out there doing, pass rushing academies or tackle academies or whatever. Like they're just out there working no matter what. And sometimes you have an injury that happens when they're preparing for the offseason program. The grind just doesn't stop. And so really, really unfortunate. The thing that this does end up opening up though, is to our couple of episodes ago, we were asked about, and we were talking about Peyton Turner. What does he have to do to, make you feel good about where he's at? He's in a contract years. They declined his 5th-year option, which isn't that surprising. Like you're going to see more and more NFL teams, I think, declining 5th-year options more often than not, as that price tag continues to roll up and as the salary cap continues to build and all that.
Agree.
Yeah. But what this does now is that it's not just about Peyton Turner proving that he can stay healthy and be out there. Now, all of a sudden, if he can show a little bit of that inside-outside versatility, there's a role that he could potentially step into, one that Tano Passignon filled remarkably well last year. One of my favorite sub packages that they ran was Tano as well as Brian Brzee on the inside, Carl Granderson on one side, and then Zach Bond on the other. Now you swap out Zach Bond for Chase Young. can you swap out Tano Passanio for Peyton Turner as somebody that has a little bit of that inside-outside versatility? So that's a name now that I'm looking at and going, okay, now there's a role, there's something attainable, there's something that you can clearly see. And I think Peyton Turner knew that well before we knew that. But there's something you can clearly go after here if you can show a little bit about that versatility.
Yeah, you saw it in the final game of the year, right? I mean, you saw Peyton Turner kick inside, and if he can stay healthy, I mean, this is you being handed something on a silver platter right now, right? You need to stay healthy and to just produce, and you have the opportunity. Now, I know Isaiah Foskey is going to get
when he's out there.
Yeah, he can be productive, but again, but Foskey's not a guy that you're gonna put inside. Peyton Turner, you will put inside. And so I'm fascinated to see how Todd Grantham actually is able to deploy that. But it is a big loss. And the fact is, you don't have Chase Young out there right now. You don't have Cam Jordan out there. It's interesting talking to one of the players that Chase Young is doing really well. He should be ready for training camp, is what I was told. And so he's definitely doing his rehab. So, and again, that's from one of the players. I'm not going to say who, but that's promising news, right? And so, it's unfortunate because, again, Tano is a big part. He's been a great teammate. He's awesome in the locker room. I remember seeing him at the HBCU combine. He's the one that's in there. He's lifting weights. He's doing all the things. Like, he's somebody who just stays around and all that stuff. And so it's unfortunate. But this is a part of the game, and it just stinks because it happened in the offseason. It didn't happen on the playing field, but at the same time, it happened in the offseason. So he does have some extra time to obviously heal up and stuff from the Achilles. And look, I think, correct me if I'm wrong. I can remember. I think it was Alex Okafor who popped his Achilles previously, and he actually had a heck of a rehab comeback. And so I think
Sheldon Rankins did it too.
Yep, Rankins was
exceeding the timeline.
Yeah, AO was one that I just was fresh in mind. I remember Rankins coming back for sure, and so I think it bodes well for him, and so it's. Again, I think the opportunity is there for Peyton Turner. It really is. And so he's got to make the most of it. And this is the prove it year for him. And if he wants to get paid some next year, you got to be able to deliver. So that's the unfortunate news. I want to get to a question, and guys, don't forget to like and subscribe, support your Second and Saints show. We are just so fabulously overwhelmed by all of your support, and it's so awesome seeing you guys chat and live, in the comments and YouTube and stuff. Jono, good friend of the show, asks a question. Yeah, your guy that you saw rendering in the Superdome, or it's not Superdome.
You know what's so funny? I think somebody else saw it and thought, I think it was Jono that saw it and thought it was Jake Madison. Was the funny thing. And so I was tripping over the fact that I thought it was Jono, and Jono thought it was Jake. That was hilarious to me.
Yeah, but he brings up a good question because Demario Davis did talk today. And he's got some fabulous things that are happening with him and Derek Carr in the community. Definitely don't want to take away from that. But he had an interesting comment, which is talking about the 100% participation at OTAs in the sense that he said the Chiefs. He didn't think the Chiefs were a team that didn't have anybody there. 100%. There were some things that weren't able to happen today. Like Rashid Shaheed had a illness, or Nathan Shepard's dealing with family related stuff. But there are some big people that are not at Saints OTAs. And again, you got to remember it's voluntary, right? Is this a big deal? First of all, and what to make of it?
I don't think it's a big deal. Because I don't even think that Kansas City, I think I would be shocked if Kansas City had 100% attendance.
I don't think they do.
You know what I mean? And so I think what that was Demario Davis being a leader and saying, here's why I'm here, right? I am here as a leader. I have a lot of respect for guys that go out there and lead by leading. I don't do the whole leading by example thing. I think the leading by example thing is literally just you doing your job. Demario is the guy that leads by example, which is a part of leadership, but it's not the sole piece of leadership. And so what I really appreciated about it was him basically casting a little bit of a challenge to his guys that either were there or weren't there, saying, stay here for those that were there. And for those that weren't there, that could have been there, maybe saying, hey, get out here. And we see this all the time to where OTA attendance week 1 is different than week 2 is different than week 3 and things like that. So we could potentially see something like that happen in week 3. But I think for the most part, that was him explaining his mindset about why he was there and why he was a part of OTAs. I turned and I looked at you during OTAs today and I said, look, if I'm Alvin Kamara or if I'm Jamal Williams, by the way, was back today. I'm not showing up for anything voluntary. Like as a running back over the age of 25 and knowing how the NFL treats you and knowing the short shelf life, I would never show up to anything voluntary if I was playing that position in particular. So shout out to Jamal Williams for putting it all out there.
Yeah.
But I do think that there are reasonable reasons, that there are sensible reasons to turn around and say, you know what? I'm not going to be out there for the voluntary stuff. And I don't necessarily think that was DeMario challenging them. I think it was more so him explaining his mindset for why he was out there, especially at this point in his career.
Yeah. And I think the elephant in the room is there's 2 big players, both on each side of the ball that aren't there, right? Alvin is one and Marshawn is the other one, right? And I think that's the 2 big ones that people are talking about. Now, again, Marshawn, they've been working on, that relationship and such, and he's got workouts from Matt Rhea. He's mandatory mini camps around there, and it is mandatory. So then if they're not there for that for some reason, then I think everybody should be worried. But again, I remember last year, this is about the point where Michael Thomas made an appearance, and that was a big deal for him to show up at OTAs. And so again, it could happen in week 3. You don't know. I mean, we just have to see. Sometimes, Alvin is a family man. Obviously, he has a daughter and such now. And I mean, I get it. I understand.
Yeah. And I believe he was out of the country for a little while too.
Yep. He was out of the country. He was doing a lot of things. And so again, I don't think it's necessarily a shot, because I think we look into a lot of these things and say, is that a shot at somebody? Look, Alvin's going to be on this team. Alvin's going to be a big part of this team. I think that they are going to find ways, but when it's all said and done, we've talked about it. If Kendray's not getting maybe the bulk of the snaps by the end of the year, maybe something is a little bit off. But Alvin needs this year as much as anybody, right? I think so. And we want to see Alvin do well. We want to see Marshawn do well. But I think we make too much of OTAs in that sense. And still, when you get 90% plus participation for the most part, I still think that's a really respectable, good number for all things considered. And so, look, I mean, as far as attendance, let's run down it, because if you haven't checked it out, go to si.com/NFL/Saints, Saints News Network. I put out all the stuff there, wrote all the observations. Ross put out a fantastic piece about the undrafted rookies. So much to talk about and so little time. Willy Wonka, my kids were actually just watching that today, so I was a little bit happy. But among those to return, so you put out Jamal Williams. That was a big one, right? Nathan Peterman was back. Wasn't in the rotation. I thought that was interesting. That could be by design, or that he's in a ramp-up period. So the rotation was Carr, Haener, and then Rattler. Jalen Ford was out there on limited basis. That's big for him. He's back on the field and starting that ramp-up period. And then Tommy Hudson, the tight end, was back out there. And so, again, we touched on Shaheed not being out there. Stanley Morgan wasn't out there. Paulson Adebo wasn't out there. He was last week. Kool-Aid McKinstry, he was in the locker room. I wouldn't worry too much about that. Obviously, he's dealing with the offseason surgery. Nephi Sewell. Now, we did see him with the linebacker group, but he wasn't in pads or anything. So that's an encouraging sign for a guy coming off an ACL injury. JT Gray, he was absent today, wasn't last week. Ryan Ramczyk, Tano, we talked about. Nathan Shepard, we also talked about. And then Chase Young is obviously the surgery. I look at that. I don't think that's, again, with the exception of 2 players we're talking about, I don't think that's a big a deal, because, you have the other guys that are dealing with injuries. Oh, and Nathan Latu, that was another one, but he was not there. But he was in the locker room. So these guys are around, but they're not necessarily in the practice field.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that what you're looking at here is a lot of guys with a lot of reasons to not be there, and and everything seems to be okay from all that. So I think that's a good perspective and a good place to be when it comes to all of it. And again, like you mentioned, getting 90% plus attendance or so, or better than 70% attendance at your OTAs. I think that's huge, especially with the voluntary situation being what it is and all that. So nothing really stands out as shocking here. I'm curious about Adebo, because he has had some injury history since he's been here. And so, you might have some concerns around all that, but we'll see. We'll see what that looks like next week.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that I would totally hit the panic button on it yet. But again, if he's not there next week, and then mandatory minicamp, we're really going to get a gauge on who's actually there and who's not.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Who's injury related, who's not. You know, I think that's obvious when everything is going to come out and you can't really hide it anymore, I guess, if you will. Since we're talking about Tano, we're talking about attendance. Another good friend of the show, Logan, asked, with the injury, do you think they need to go free agency, Emmanuel Ogbah or Yannick Ngakoue, which I was always team Yannick a lot for sure, or Trajan Jeffcoat, which, let's be fair, I thought he was good last week. I didn't see too much of him this week. You know, I think just in general, before we answer that, a lot of players, the heat got to him today. Dehydration, like Rico Payton was one of those that left early. Dehydration, but he's okay. But again, it was hotter. Like today felt like an August summer day in New Orleans. And so poor defense, they had to wear the black jerseys today. And
I know
it was hot, y'all. And I'm not saying that, like, I've been in South Louisiana since right after Hurricane Andrew. So I mean, you're talking about 1992. I'm used to the South Louisiana heat, but today is, you know, you're just praying for a cloud to come.
Today was tough. I asked Keith Williams, because Coach Keith Williams, New Orleans Saints new wide receiver coach, was out there again in sweatpants and a full hoodie. And I said, you always out here just rocking like the full cover up. And he said to me, quote, hold on, let me grab my notes, I'm built different. So, I mean, that's what I got.
To be fair, and you know, it's funny. I talked to Denarius McGee earlier after practice too. And he was talking, he's like, he wakes up, man. He wakes up just being excellent and all these other things. So it's just all sorts of funness that Keith Williams, man, we talked about him plenty, but man, that's going to be one of the best hires I think the Saints have made in the offseason. I know Clint Kubiak and all the other ones, but man, I like Keith Williams. And one other thing, I didn't put this in my notes, but one thing to appreciate is after practice, he had the entire wide receiver group in a huddle, and they stayed about maybe a good almost 10 minutes after practice while DA was talking, just to talk about different things. Now, we don't know the nature of it, but that's a good sign of a good leader. And I think that's worth, you know, praising, if you will, and just kind of some things that kind of get lost in the shuffle. But I mean, this guy's a leader, and I really am excited to see what he's going to be able to do. But going back to Logan's question, do they need to sign somebody, or are they good with what they got? Because I think Trajan is one, but you got Nico Lalos, who was preseason darling last year. But, you know, at this point, they got to go get somebody right now.
Yeah, as much as I would love a signing of Emmanuel Ogbah or a signing of Yannick Ngakoue, I think what's more likely is that they go and grab like a Kyle Phillips or something like that. But the thing about this too is that I think they've already made their move for this injury. Right. Yeah. Because this isn't new information. This is new information to us. It's not new information to the Saints. Right. Because again, you know what I mean? So, you know, Passanio was injured, excuse me, you know, did have the Achilles tear before like the off season. And so with that being the case, or before off season activities and things like that. So with that being the case, the Saints were already aware of this. And so they've probably already made the move that they're going to make to go with all of this. But, you know, that's the way that I would look at it. So I doubt that they make a move at all at the position. But if they did, I would see probably them going to like Kyle Phillips or something like that, like somebody that they've had in the building before.
Yeah, I don't see it either. Again, that's why we talked about Peyton Turner, Isaiah Foskey. I mean, this was a crowded defensive end group as it was, you know what I mean? And so maybe it opens the door for more from some of these other players. And so we'll have to see. And again, you don't really get to tell how people are really doing until you get to training camp. And so, look, if somebody else goes down, I mean, they're fine from a numbers perspective at the moment. But, you know, I think we should expect Cam to get ramped up here shortly. And then, like we talked about Chase Young, I think training camp he's right on target for training camp. And so I think that's good. And, you know, then we'll kind of figure it out.
Yeah, there's your Tano Passanio signing right there. It was Chase Young. You know what I mean? Like it was Chase Young, it was Trajan Jeffcoat, it was Nathan Latu. Like they kind of already did it.
Yeah, and I feel good about the room. I know it's on paper, right? But they got to get to the quarterback faster. That's why they got Chase Young. And I think they got some prototypes there that will help get to the quarterback a little bit faster. And so, you know, again, I think they're set for the most part, but things can change, and hopefully there's no more injuries, because the injuries suck.
Yes.
I'm going to tackle this question, even though, you know, it's a short no. But a scenario where Dennis Allen's gone and Kubiak becomes head coach. I mean, let's just talk about this. Did you see some of the projections for the Saints to finish 4-13? I kind of laughed at that one. Like, I literally just said, this person is smoking a lot of good ganja, if you will, and that's putting it nicely. But 4-13, come on, man. Like, yeah, y'all are just putting stuff out to just put stuff out. Like, it's just like Facebook. You just start crap just to start crap. Like, slow down. But the question is, if Dennis does not have a good season, again, I think it's playoffs or bust. You have to make the playoffs with this team. You have to do it. I don't know, and I don't get the sense that he's going to be ousted after this year. I just don't feel that way. Unless it just goes, if you do finish a 4-13, then I think you have abysmal. You can't.
Yeah.
But if you turn in another 7-10, 8-9, 9-8, we're so close or we're close, he doesn't get the boot. I just don't feel it. Now, long term, do I think Clint Kubiak could be a coach? Yeah, absolutely. He comes from that great lineage, which, oh, by the way, Daenerys McGee is part of that. You know, he's talking about Bobby Slovak in San Francisco and kind of the Clint as the passing game coordinator, all that connection. It's all intertwined. It all makes sense. So that's where that kind of came from. And so, again, the short answer is no. Your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I don't think that there is any sense of trying to move on from Dennis Allen expeditiously or anything like that. Like, I don't see any of that. I think it's got to be like a abysmal season where that is then the result, like that in order for that to be the result. And interestingly too, like Clint Kubiak has talked about before how he's not here for the spotlight. And so I'm curious about his own desires to be a head coach too, because you can want to hire him all you want, but if he doesn't want to be that guy, then he doesn't want to be that guy. You know what I mean? So I'm curious if that would even be something that would be of interest to him, whether it be at this point or at some other point. Now, you only get 32 of these jobs possible, so you probably take it if you're offered it. You know what I mean? But at the same time, I don't even know if that's going to be like something that's necessarily like in his desire. He strikes me as a scheme guy, not a rah-rah leader guy and stuff like that, at least like publicly and stuff. And he talked about not being not wanting to, he's not here for the spotlight. He's here to produce and all these other things. So I don't know. I don't know if the stars align from even the early perspective of interest for that to even be the case.
Yeah. And I think we even pointed out today, like, he's really authoritative when he needs to be. Like,
he really is.
He carries himself like quiet, but he's very authoritative when he needs to be and loud. And so, again, I don't see anything long term. And look, we're just worried about getting to next OTAs and getting to training camp and preseason, and hopefully, again, they got to come out strong. I don't know if it's there. I'm encouraged by what I see in the offense. I'm like really encouraged. I joked with you today. Yeah. I think we've seen more motion in 2 practices than we did all of last season in training camp.
I swear I agree with you. I swear I agree. I think we've seen more motion in OTAs and minicamp than we saw in the season last year. Like, it's been insane how much they're running it, which is so out of the ordinary for this part of the process, but it's such a good idea to get it implemented because it's going to be a DNA piece for them. The way they use motion, the way they use play action, the way they use eye candy, rollouts, all these other things like that, it's going to be a part of their DNA. So you kind of have to get it right now. So I absolutely love seeing it. Where I think that the coaching question becomes really interesting, John, and I don't want to derail with this for too long because it's not, so forgive me. But the thing that becomes really interesting about it is like an interim coaching situation. Who do you go to if Dennis Allen, let's just say, couldn't coach a game? Who do you go to? My vote is Darren Rizzi.
I think I would have said probably Joe Woods too. It would have been
Joe Woods too, 100%.
Joe Woods or Riz. Riz is probably the first up. I think that's right. Riz would probably be.
And I mean, he's got the assistant head coach tag, so it also makes sense hierarchically. But the other piece of it too is that, like, I just like seeing that dude argue with a referee. 100% sign me up. See, Darren Rizzi throwing a challenge flag. Please. Yeah.
You're going to see that thing hit the goalpost. Wait, I'm sure. Oh, man. Yeah. And so, but one of the things, again, we're going to stay on point, but like we're talking about Kubiak, the motion. Like, we saw a play where Juwan Johnson and Dallin Holker went in motion on the same play. Like, it's just a thing of beauty. And I think one of the cool things Dennis said today was the fact that the play action gives the defense a challenge in some aspects. Like he said, we've been seeing the same offense for years. I don't know if that was a shot or not, but I mean, it's reality. They have been seeing the same offense. So I think it better prepares the defense. And we said this before, is I think it's going to better prepare them against some of those better teams out there that do employ stuff like that. And so I'm interested to see if that's the true thing. I mean, of course, joint practices in San Francisco is going to help us out a little bit, and preseason action is going to help us out a little bit. But another tip to like Spencer Rattler last week, we said he wasn't dealing with any type of play action. This week he has play action, so there's growth there, and it's starting to catch on with some. But again, let's not jump over too much. But questions in here, I definitely want to answer the questions.
Yeah, for sure.
Another one, tight end rotation, Michael Jacobson, guy they had from practice squad. I think some people have said that he stood out some, and how would you slot them all right now? Probably depends if you put Taysom in there, but I think it was Juwan. I think it's Foster, Taysom, and then probably Dallin Holker for me, just because he's been running with the first team so far. Look, Jacobson, again, I don't know that he stood out as much as maybe some people meant out to be and stuff. But again, this is the time where it's OTA season. I think you're going to see some of those guys flash and stuff. But again, he's somebody I keep on the radar. But I think Dallin Holker gives you more upside as a vertical threat. And that was another thing, too. Just I'm thinking about, too. They attacked the middle of the field a lot today, too. Like, it was intentional that they were working the middle of the field. So, but your thoughts on the tight end room?
Yeah, I would agree. I look at it the same way that you look at it. Dallin Holker with the 35-inch arms, he's just the catch radius is insane. And then the ability to be able to utilize him in the short area of the field, the ability to move him around. He's just a very interesting piece. And I had somebody tell me to watch out for Dallin Holker if he's able to pick up the offense, or once he's able to pick up the offense. And so I feel like, and so I feel like the confidence is very much there for Holker as well. I think Jacobson could be like a really nice, special teams asset, and a really nice, practice squad guy that you can fall back on that can make some plays for you as a pass catcher, because he has had some nice catches over the course of the two OTAs. But I would still kind of slot him in right now as having a bigger hill to climb than Holker, and therefore behind Holker. But we'll see how things pan out, as you mentioned, throughout the rest of the process. It's early, but yeah, I very much expect it to be like, if we were to say who's your top four, it's Juwan, Foster, Taysom, Dallin for me.
Yeah. And Jacobson's a little bit different type of breed. Like Dallin's more of a pass catching threat, and then Jacobson's more of a dirty work guy and can catch some passes and stuff.
And there's value in that.
Yeah, there is. And that's why I always say, like, somebody like Foster, he doesn't get a lot of love in some aspects, but he's a trench work guy. It does the dirty work first, and then he can catch second. I mean, that's just sometimes what you have to have. You have to have a balance. And so I'm fascinated to see how it goes. But again, it's a name to keep an eye on. And we had plenty of names to talk about from today.
Right.
Let's jump in again. I like the questions. So keep them coming, guys. Really appreciate it. Yeah, it's just a good thing when you have interaction. But O-line, how's that looking? Well, I mean, it was different, not different, but like Nick Saldiveri was left guard today. What's interesting, I talked to him yesterday. Yeah, the whole way through this time. I actually talked to him. He's actually playing around 330 right now. He said he's bulked up, and it looks like it. Like, he is bulked up a good bit. I thought he was losing a little weight, and I asked him. He's like, "No, man." I said, "I'm actually pushing closer to 330, and he's actually put on some like muscle." So
yeah,
I'm pretty fascinated.
Yeah, if he put on weight, it was muscle for sure.
Yeah, and look, I turned to you. I said during one of the plays, like, he had a really, really nice block on Carl Granderson. Like, that was one of the reps I saw, and it wasn't like full contact or anything, but like, he was right in the position with his hands, the placement, all the things that you'd want, and was able to stop Carl Granderson kind of in his tracks. So again,
so he was running.
Yeah, correct. And so I think that's encouraging. But Tali Wonga back at left tackle, that's interesting, because you got a second-year player at left guard and a first-year player at left tackle. Then you got Trevor Penning at right tackle, C's in right guard, and then Eric McCoy at center. So, I'd say, how are they looking? Again, we don't really get a gauge until training camp, but so far I think it's been fairly positive. Although, Trevor Penning had a couple of plays today. We got
he had a couple
Michael
struggle
Hodges mad at him today. He fell on a play. He had a false start on a play. So
like
it's
Granderson
not
passed on
perfect.
what would have been a sack on one play too. Got beat.
Uh-huh.
But look, if you're gonna get beat by anybody, you might as well get beat by the team's best pass rusher. I mean, like that's okay. I'll take that. You know what I mean? While learning a brand new position. So
yep. Oh man, Greg. Yeah, I agree. Did you see those power rankings for Derek Carr? Like, I think I saw one NFC South.
He was like
20, top 10.
24th, 25th.
They didn't even rank him top 10 in the NFC South. Like, come on, guys.
Wait a minute.
You didn't see that one. They put Caleb Williams at like number 10, and they didn't have Carr in there anyway. I'm like, come on. Like, y'all need to stop, man. Okay. Yes, thank you, Paul. That is the OG Louisiana Ice Skaters jersey. I grew up in Lafayette, so thank you. It is one of my amazing pieces that I have. Trizzy, another good fan of the show, asked dream trade target for the Saints. Man,
none.
Yeah, none. I don't. I think
my
we have
dream trade is
signing.
for them to not trade for anybody.
But okay, so that's a good, interesting point. I don't know, because the way they're managing the cap, this is why I don't think you're also going to sign somebody like Ngakwe or Agba, because they're still trying to manage towards the cap. Obviously, you saw what Andres Pete's deal was with the Raiders. Clearly, they weren't wanting to pay him that, and Andres wanted a fresh start too. Yeah. But I think this is kind of those low risk, high reward type deals that you're looking for. And I think I say that, and we've been talking about the Justin Simmons hype train. I just don't know if Simmons is in the cards now. If he wants money, then I don't know. But I think it's going to be fascinating over the next several weeks before we get to training camp where he lands. And I think New Orleans should be on the radar. But again, I don't see him trading at the moment, and I just don't know. But dream trade, I mean, if we're playing like Madden and who would I target? I mean, there's tons of players, I think so. But what is the position that you would try to trade for? I think that's probably the question I would ask.
If I was going to trade for anybody, I'd probably have to go offensive line, either trying to find a right tackle or a left guard, or wide receiver. Like, those are the spots that I would probably try to make a trade, but that I'm not pressed. You know what I mean? I wouldn't be pressed about either of those either.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think O-line is probably that, unless you find some type of pass rusher or somebody on the interior. I think that's, I mean, I don't think it's anything crazy. Man, 12-5. Floor is 9-7. Floor, the high is 12-5. I'm not going. Well, it's 9-8, so it would have to be 9-8. Or 10-7. Thanks, Trizzy. Thanks for the support. Really appreciate that. We got some funny comments there. Y'all are cutting up today. Motion in this economy. Oh man. Oh gosh. So let's see. I want to get to these questions, man. This one. This is a good one. If Carr had 25 touchdowns with Pete, he's guaranteed 30 with Clint if he's healthy, right?
No.
I mean, that's a big if. I don't know if that's guaranteed, because they're run first, right? And I think that is a good segue to talk about Taysom Hill.
Yeah.
Shotgun looks, handing him the ball off, like
the lone back in shotgun looks.
I know it's exciting.
I was so hyped. I love it.
I don't know that I've gotten more excited about a possibility other than Taysom Hill. Like, I think they're finding a way to use him, and of course they're going to be smart. But he's playing personal punt protector. He was running fakes out of there. He was running the ball. He's going in motion. He's catching, wheel routes out of the backfield, which I think was one of the best plays of the day, this wheel route that he caught. And so again, I think it's fascinating to see what happens. But again, going back to the question, I think the run first is the goal, but Carr could have 30 touchdowns if they go in the red zone. I think the red zone is where you got to look at, because they were horrendous in the red zone last year to start the season. Then they added the extra practice, and then they suddenly got better. Imagine that. But I think that you look at the red zone, this year, that Carr could have increased production in the red zone, and that would probably be the best thing. Be a run first team. Carr doesn't have to have a ton of yards. He doesn't have to have a ton of completions, but in the red zone, rack up your touchdowns. I don't care. Get 40 touchdowns and they're all in the red zone. I don't care. Like,
Yeah, easy.
That'd be a great
Easy.
thing. So, man.
One of the things that stood out to me from talking with Derek Carr last week was that he mentioned that some of the concepts that they began to introduce late last year are in this scheme. And
that's
so I think that
awesome point.
You know what I mean? Yep. I think that that's the place because he had such a strong end to the season, like a top 5 quarterback end to the season, like post week 12 or over the last like 6 or 7 weeks of the season, whatever it was. That's the spot that I was. Oh yeah, there we go. Oh yeah.
Hey, shout out to Numbers Don't Lie.
Yeah, he's got the numbers and they don't lie. So I would say that like those are the things I love it. Those are the things that I looked at and I go, okay, so that's maybe where like you could see Derek Carr really benefit from this system is that like whatever level of production he had towards the end of the season, extrapolate that over 17 games. That's a thing. I think that asking whether or not he's guaranteed to have something is where things get tricky because I'm never going to say that anybody's guaranteed to get anything. But at the same time, it's like you said, it's a run first type of a situation. So if it's a big year for Alvin Kamara, Kendre Miller, Jamal Williams, whomever, then that subtracts from what you have to do in the passing game. And the less you have to do in the passing game, i.e. throwing yourself back into games, come back, all these other things, kind of the better off you can be at the same time. So I'm not mad at the idea that that might not be necessary as a part of this game.
Yeah, all I care about is the offensing this year. I just need to because I've sat through some really hard years, and I'm just it's hard because the defense has done its part because for so long it was Drew carrying the team practically,
right?
And the defense would just let them down year after year, and then finally they got a defense. And then they just, they had put it together, but now we're back to the point where like defense is really good. I'm not gonna say it's like Dome Patrol days because Dome Patrol, like they were in a league of their own, but like that defense was nasty. The offense wasn't that great, but I think we had this offense has the potential to be good, if not great. I'd start with good. I don't know because somebody asked the question, where is it at? How close can they be to the 49ers and Dolphins offense? I don't know if you say, I mean, it is a copycat league, but I'm not going to sit here and say that they're going to be Brock Purdy in the 49ers offense because I don't take this as a shot, but I think 49ers are a little bit more talented on offense, and so are the Dolphins.
Yeah. I would agree with that. The Dolphins have a lot more speed because that's their brand. The 49ers have a lot more positionlessness because that's their brand. And so I think there's going to be things that are like inherently different from how the Saints approach it, to how the 49ers approach it, to how the Rams approach it, to how the, because the Rams are also McVay branded. So they do everything out of the same formation, same look, all that other stuff, which you'll see elements of all of that in New Orleans. So I think that like you'll see moments that are reminiscent of those other offenses, but as a whole, they will be more representative of themselves in Clint Kubiak's approach to the wide zone offense. I think that's the way that I would highlight it. But I do think there will be things that will remind you of, like we saw the cheat motion today, to where you have a receiver.
We'll get to this question. But yes, you got so excited about the cheat motion. Like, I mean, you're literally like a kid at the candy store. So explain A, what cheat motion is, and then B, what went down.
So this is something that took the league by storm last year, thanks to the Miami Dolphins and the San Francisco 49ers. So this is a perfect idea towards this question. Cheat motion is when you have a receiver lined up in the slot or inside of an outside receiver. And then before the ball is snapped, they start their motion kind of orbiting around that outside receiver to start picking up speed at the line of scrimmage. That way, when the ball is snapped, they're already running. And so it's just an easier way to get your receivers to top speed without them having to start from zero at the snap. Think about like watching like the Canadian Football League, and then the receivers run up to the line of scrimmage, and before they get to the line of scrimmage, the quarterback snaps the ball, and these guys are already at top friggin' speed before they get, 2-3 yards downfield. This still takes a little bit of, you still need a little bit of hitch in your giddy up here, but for guys like Chris Olave, for guys like Bub Means, for guys like Rashid Shaheed, who are checks notes fast, it's really, really helpful in terms of getting them up to top speed right away. So that orbit motion, or not orbit motion, but that motion in which they orbit around the outside receiver and then the ball is snapped as they're getting up to full speed, approaching the line of scrimmage, just helps them get to that top end speed. Those top end speed guys get to that top speed a little bit faster. So we saw that today in practice, and I was like, oh, buddy, now we're cooking. Like Yeah, man. Like that was a perfect, the rue is now dark enough. Like I absolutely love it. Like I love seeing that. And we've seen everything applied here. So so that was one of those things that I got super excited about. So like that, when you see that, will be reminiscent of Miami, will be reminiscent of San Francisco. When the Saints run a bunch of different plays out of the same look, that will be reminiscent of the Rams, but they'll have their own sort of brand to it all.
Sure. Yeah. No, perfect. I don't really have much to add on except I can't wait to see it more in a game. That's really the big
I just want to see it in a game. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like
that's really it, because I could just see Rashid getting at top speed and Carr even as a decoy. Like the concept of that is just exciting. Like taking off that safety over the top or different things. I mean, there's just so many different things that could happen from that, and so we'll see. I mean, it's a good one. Another question here: can Kendre Miller unseat Jamal Williams as RB2? I think Jamal, and we pointed this out, Jamal was in full pads today. Like, I mean, we're talking about the pants and everything, and he has the best swag when it comes to his cleats and stuff. And I actually talked to him a little bit after in the locker room. I mean, he's doing well. Like, he had a good offseason. I think he's, I feel like Jamal's entering a year where, like, the first year was tough, right? And this year, he knows, I think, that you can have better production in this offense. We've kind of said it, and we said it even earlier, but if Kendre Miller is not the guy at the end of the year who's not getting the bulk of the reps, I'm going to be a little bit surprised. Now, that could mean Alvin's doing fantastic, which would be a great thing. But I think when you look at the share, the running back by committee, what Kendre Miller is able to do in space, different things, I think towards the end of the year, it may not happen immediately, but towards the end of the year, I think Kendre's got the bulk of the snaps if he stays healthy and can produce. But your thoughts on Jamal, that whole entire backfield, because they didn't really change anything. And we've pointed out guys like Jordan Mims, who's, again, looked pretty good today. Again, he's somebody I'd keep an eye on for sure. But your thoughts?
Yeah. It's interesting because I almost think it would behoove everybody to walk away now from RB1, RB2, RB3 vocabulary going into this new offense, because it's going to be based on the situation more than anything else. But the thing that's tricky about it is that, like, somebody's still going to be the starting guy or the first one on the field or the one that gets the more reps, all this other stuff. So there's a part of me that kind of feels like it depends. So this goes to, it's like the running back version of Sean Payton's offense with wide receivers. Wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 didn't really matter because it was matchup defined. Going up against this team, we're using this player to attack their defense. I could see something similarly, just like we saw. So here's another one that's reminiscent of San Francisco, Miami, right? Yeah. The committee running back system becomes a true committee running back system. And so one of them is going to end up with the higher percentage of offensive snaps than the other two by the end of the season. That might be injury related. That might be availability related for other purposes. That might be scheme related, whatever. But I kind of think that it's all going to be matchup defined. And so week 1 against Carolina, letting Alvin Kamara go out there and do his thing might be different than week 2 against the Dallas Cowboys, where that might be a little bit more of a, Jamal Williams game or a Kendre Miller game where they want the younger guy going out there doing more dynamic things, blah, blah, blah. And so I really think that that's going to be kind of the thing that defines RB1, RB2, RB3, is that that's all going to move around by game. You're going up against a weak defensive line that's dealing with some injuries, that has been, moved off their spot over and over again by previous offensive linemen. Run with Jamal Williams right up the middle, like go right at him. And so I think that, like, it's going to depend. But if I were to project how the carries end up by the end of the season, or I shouldn't say the carries, sorry, the percentage of offensive snaps, because some guys are not just going to be carry guys, they're going to be reception guys. I would say that AK and Kendre Miller are going to end up with more than Jamal Williams by the time it's all said and done, if those are the top 3 guys. But the reasons why are going to kind of be dictated by matchup, I imagine.
Yeah. Yeah, like, I mean, you look at, and we've pointed this out, but Dallas and Philly, exceptional front sevens. Yeah. I would expect them to beat them in the trenches, right? You know what I'm saying? Right. You're going to have to be a little bit more creative and game plan accordingly.
Trying to get your guys
out.
Get
that ball out of, get the ball out of Carr's hands, because, Philly's front four and they can get after it. And I think that's going to be real tough. And I think that's where somebody like Clint and his smarts are going to come into play. And so I'm excited to see that. Get some more question. Ruiz looks more fit. Yes, we touched on this last week that he dropped weight. He's now playing around 315, or he lost about 10 pounds.
Like
he looks fantastic. Definitely looks fantastic. Ben asked about the O-line. We touched on it earlier. And for those who don't know, if you're new to our show, first of all, like and subscribe. We really appreciate it. Second of all, we put the chapters in afterwards. And so you can go back and watch and check that out. But, we touched on the offensive line a little bit. Let's see. Saints being a 10-win team. Sorry, my computer's computering. Can it be a 10-win team of offenses? Yeah, I don't think, like, if the thing is, they don't need a ton to be a 10-win team. They just need to beat some of these good teams to be a 10-win team. That's all. That's all you have to do. You're going to have to steal some games. You can't, lollygag. You can't just give away a game like Green Bay last year. I mean, that's the difference between them being a 10-win team and being in the postseason. Like, that game mattered, right? You come back to bite them and stuff. So, I mean, I get it, but that's the big thing. I know we got some fans in Ireland. I want to talk about Charlie Smith.
Oh, yeah.
Ireland and all them. Shout out to them. I've had some really awesome interactions from some of the guys across the pond, is what I would say. And so there's a huge following for Charlie Smith. Man, I tell you, look, because I noticed I was there checking all of his field goals, all of his kicks today. Went 5 for 5, looked really comfortable. We're talking about extra point to about 44 yards. He's doing right hash, left hash. One of the things I said to you is his velocity on his kick is insane. Like, I mean, he gets some height on the ball when he kicks. And so we've been saying it. We got a kicker competition and we have a punter competition because Matt Hayball looked really good. Now, we touched on Lou Hedley last week that he actually looked pretty good. Matt Hayball looked good as well. And so I know it probably doesn't get people excited, but look, Charlie Smith, man, I know his confidence took a big boost today because of what he was able to do out there. And so I think he is only going to use that as a springboard. But your thoughts on Charlie Smith? And let's talk about Matt Hayball a little bit while we're at it.
Happy to. I'll mention real quick, Charlie Smith went 5 of 5 on all of his kicks. And that was on a range from extra point to 44-yard field goals. So
kicking against the wind too, I might add, because Matt Hayball was kicking with the wind. So yeah.
Good call there. And just look good. And again, like booming kicks, like the leg is 100% there. And John, you were at the end of the end zone. Were you able to see like the location? Like, was he up the middle center. Every time?
Dead center every time. Yeah, it felt like that.
I was watching.
He was straight on. Like, I mean, it was pretty. It was a pretty make. It wasn't like, ooh, there's one kick I think was listening a little bit to the left, but didn't like curve back in. But it was looked really good. So yes.
And I think that they lost a couple footballs over the shrubs back there behind the field goals because he just got so much leg into those. So it was awesome. And then the Matthew Hayball, the thing that stood out for us was that he had, was it 3 punts, John, over 5 seconds of hang time?
Yeah, definitely let's consult my notes. Let's say so he had 1 503, 528, and the last one was 497. That was 497.
That's
so, and he had 485. And so I mean, he had some really beautiful ones. 478 was another one, but and the other thing we didn't really think about or remember is he's a left-footed punter,
right?
Like, this is the hard-hitting analysis for you guys. Is he's lefty? He's a left-footed punter. We just stuff he's taking him. Did you know Jimmy Graham used to play basketball?
No way, no shot. The other thing that I took away from his punts too is that he had 3 different types of punts. We saw the end over end, which is really hard to field. Because it's the end over end punt is one that you want to specialize in as a punter, because when somebody goes to field the ball, it's literally rotating away from them. So if it catches like their breastplate or something like that, as opposed to cradling directly into their arms, it is going to have the trajectory to go away from them, like bounce out. So it's tough to field. He had another punt, which was a spiral punt, which is just ones where like you need to get it out of there. You need to keep it in the air. He had some beautiful ones. I felt like I was looking straight up a couple times after he punted. And then he had another one that was kind of like, I think Sharif called it like a watermelon punt, where it kind of like it was kind of flat, but it was just kind of like wobbling this way, which again, very hard to field because you want to catch the football point down, but you have to catch it on its side, and then you have to readjust it as you go to bring it over to your return hold. And so there's a chance for you screwing that up while you're waiting, while these two gunners are bearing down on you and a punt team is bearing down on you and all that other stuff. So that was another thing that I thought was really interesting about his punt style, is that he showed off just in those, 10 punts or whatever, 3 different styles of punts, which I think is worth noting.
Yeah, and Jermaine Jackson, I mean, he had to adjust a little bit. Yeah, he had to adjust. We're both nerds. Come on, bro. Come on, we're both nerds. It comes with the territory.
Oh, look at the different ways he kicks the football. Like, what is wrong with it? Yeah, I love it.
A lot is the short answer. But yeah, Jermaine Jackson had to make some adjustments towards the end too, and so some of his punts went inside the 10. Like one of them was a touchback, but the other one, the gunner. Not this is against Bub Means, but like he had a chance to make the play on it, and it was so close. So again, it looks good. So that's special teams, and there's so much else. Go to Saints News Network. I'm telling you, go look at it. I got a whole entire 3 paragraphs on special teams,
gunner reps, everything,
all of the things you need to know. Marquita asked a good question too. With the cap situation, would it put us better situation for next season? Mickey actually talked about this some at the Golf Classic, and it's not like it's a space where it is great, but they're working towards it. Is the thing is what I would say. They're still gonna have to deal with some things next year, for sure. Just because that's the nature of the business. I mean, if they trade Marshawn, that still would kind of hurt, or if they release Marshawn, that would hurt. I mean, there's certain things you got to figure out. Things with Alvin. I mean, there's just a whole bunch of stuff that could affect the cap situation. But I think this is a thing, the plan all along is that they're trying to not be where they have to keep making up. And then they do it every year and then they get roasted. Yeah. But again, people don't understand the deals with TV go up, and they're really just trying to catch up from COVID. And if COVID didn't happen,
they're trying to do. Yeah.
And if COVID didn't happen, everything would be fine and nobody would care. But here we are, and Poindexter's over here. Well, the Saints are in salary cap hell and all this other stuff. And I mean, you know how it is, dude. He's just
I love those dweebs.
Yeah, you're calling us nerds because we know about football. Try opening a finance book.
Right. I think the Saints are I don't imagine that with this current regime, at least, that they're ever going to get to a situation to where they're under the cap for the next year. They're actively going to gap their way in GAAP. It's the principles of finance and things like that, but they're actively going to borrow against their future to have salary cap. Now they're spending the same amount of money. It's just that they're spending a little bit of next year's as opposed to worrying about this year's. And that allows them to keep things low for this year, yada, yada, yada. And so I think the way that the Saints kind of go about this in their ideal world is that instead of them being $60 million over the salary cap next year, they're $30 to $40 million over the salary cap for next year. And then that becomes manageable down the way. But
yeah,
that's the way I expect it to be, at least. That's what I agree.
I mean, we'll see, but what do we know? Could surprise us, but I mean, the TV deals are going to go up. The salary cap's going to go up a lot next year. It just is. Yeah. I mean, you're going to have as we talked about the other week, they did a highlight. You're going to have to spend almost $1,000 to have every service to be able to watch football this year. Come on, man. What do you think that money's going to? Michael I have to laugh at this question. Michael asked if Colin can get a tutty today this season. I hope nothing more would make me happier to see Colin Saunders get a touchdown. I just feel like it needs to happen.
Week 18 on the last play of the game when it should be a kneel down. Just hand it to Colin Saunders. What are we doing?
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
we know how this goes. No, man. I would love to see it.
Yeah, man. There's so many questions, and I don't want to respect all of them. I, of course, respect your time, but we've kind of talked. Well, we can just do rapid fire. Who has more rushing yards, Miller, Kamara? I think Kamara.
I'm going to say Kamara. Yeah,
I'm going to say Kamara, but Miller has more receptions and he has more receiving yards. That's what I'll say.
Oh,
just my gut.
Yeah.
And Taysom, we talked about Taysom a bit, doing everything under the sun.
The answer is yes.
Yes.
What are they doing with Taysom? Yes.
His position is football player. That's what you need to know. This is one I want to get to because, again, we talk about OTAs and we've been talking a little bit about it, but UDFA Stormwatch, there were a lot of rookies who made some plays today. And you wrote about a couple of them.
So I grabbed my pen because I wrote it.
Yeah, we got notes from it and all that stuff. And like official. Miller Bradford, I think, is probably the first one we start with. 2 picks on Spencer Rattler today.
Yeah.
It's set up by a really nice pass breakup by Lawrence Johnson on the first one. He's another one. He also had another pass breakup. So Lawrence Johnson had some pass breakups. Christian Boyd had some tackle for losses. We saw Kyler Ball with really some pressures. Isaiah Stallbird looked pretty good.
Tackle for a loss for him too.
Yeah. So, I mean, talk about what you saw, what you kind of wrote, but there's a lot of rookies that were making some good splash plays early on. This is a really good thing.
Yeah, I highlight Miller Bradford and Isaiah Stallbird just because we've seen it now for 2 practices, right? So we've seen them have these impacts. Bradford looked pretty good his first week. And then coming into the second week, finally getting a couple of interceptions. And again, just to walk away with 2 interceptions in the same practice, that's typically really good. You don't see that a lot. So, because we're talking about him being on the field for 8 throws of Spencer Rattler's, and he intercepted a quarter of those passing attempts. Like that's the way that I would look at it here. And so the first one was in 7-on-7s, as John mentioned, tipped up by Lawrence Johnson in coverage on a target to Bub Means. And you're going to notice a trend here. On a target to Bub Means, gets tipped up, and then Miller Bradford was able to intercept it. Would have been a pretty nice return. I wouldn't call it a pick six. Would have been a pretty nice return. He had some green grass ahead of him, but again, it was 7-on-7, so who really knows? And then comes back later on in team drills, double coverage down the field, Spencer Rattler targeting Bub Means, and went for him in double coverage. He was throwing against the wind, so the ball came up a little bit shorter than I think he intended. It hung up big time. But Miller Bradford just did what he typically does as a playmaker, and he
did at TCU.
Adjusted. Yep. He adjusted, got under the ball, clean interception, nice. So for me, like, that was a big standout thing. For Isaiah Stallbird, the thing that I really liked about him was that last week we saw him with a great just read and react on a pass by Spencer Rattler, jumping the route to the tight end. No, it wasn't to the tight end. I think it was to Kyle Sheets, actually. And
sounds right.
Ends up being able to make a jump on the ball. Ended up not being able to reel in the interception, but still, like, great jump on the ball. And then this week we see him get into the backfield.
It was Kyle Sheets.
Thank you. Nailed
I just had check notes. We come prepared, y'all.
And then the next one was, and then today he had a really nice tackle for a loss, breaking in from the backside of a zone run that was going to the left side. So he was coming off the backside of the formation, breaks through the line of scrimmage, and then got in position for what looked like it could have been a tackle for a loss. I'm sorry, I can't give you better than that, but they're not actually tackling, right? So, like, that's the best that we could do. And Monty Rice was also in position to make a nice play there too.
Yeah.
But that was another play to where Stallbird stood out. So now we've seen him in coverage, which former safety transitioning the linebacker has also played linebacker before, but he has the coverage ability. So seeing that last week was cool, but then now being able to see him, like, shoot the gap in the run game, that was great to see as well.
Yeah, and I told you, man, Stallbird's one of my guys to watch, man. Yep. I think he's just so twitchy. He's fast. Again, a guy who played safety, now playing linebacker. They're giving him, play calling responsibilities and stuff. And so, look, I think Bradford has an opportunity. And I said this too, is that he just needs the proper coaching. And I think we said this before on our episodes that Marcus Robertson is the best coach for him, right? Because
he's a developer.
The inconsistency is partly in coaching, right? But I think Bradford's a guy who can make the decisions based off the coaching. And so I think it's a big moment for him. And again, I'm just excited to see how some of these guys obviously develop over the course of the time. And I think, you look at the rookies, it's good to see some of them stand out so quickly. And look, I would say this too, the whole Spencer Rattler stuff, I wouldn't jump to any conclusions, right? He's a rookie. He's going to make mistakes. The only thing I told people is just pump the brakes on him starting week 17, right? You know what I mean? Like that's the only thing that I think people should. I think he's going to be good. I think he's going to be strong. I do like Jake Haener and what he's able to do. I think he had a pretty decent day overall, even though he didn't have it statistically. But he made that really tight throw to Jordan Mims on the wheel route when coverage was there by Willie Gay Jr. I think it was there, but it was able to get home and stuff. And so, again, I wouldn't make too much of a deal on Spitzer Rattler. Again, it's going to happen. I think the biggest thing is he's got to target some other people other than Bub Means. I get it, trust in Bub Means, but he's got to trust some other targets too.
Yeah, he's really, really comfortable with Bub Means. I mean, he had a tip pass that almost got intercepted, and his last pass by Ugo Amadi targeting Bub Means. He had another where he kind of stared Bub Means down a little bit more than he necessarily needed to, and then kind of had to try to check out of that and get to somebody else and things like that. So I think he's just got to get comfortable with some of the other guys that are around him. I mean, if you want a little bit of a comparison here, Chicago Bears camp, just recently, there was all the news about Caleb Williams throwing a bunch of interceptions and stuff like that. And like
seven.
Yeah. And the thing about it is like, good. Get that out of the way now. Like, make the mistakes now. Take the risk. Drew Brees used to do this all the time. He would make throws in training camp and practice and stuff like that he wouldn't make on a Sunday. He just wanted to see how much he can push it and stuff like that. So there's no need to overreact to it. Like the experience of translating from a college player to a pro player is very nonlinear, and that's okay.
Yeah, for sure. I couldn't agree anymore. I mean, it's just, everybody just got to temper their expectations a little bit, and also don't jump to conclusions, right? Let's slow down. That's all. Greg talks about Colin Saunders, what we were talking about earlier. William Perry, Super Bowl 20, I think, gets the Pats. They won 46-10. That was a big one. Yeah, they talked about, it was Dick Enberg, one of my favorite commentators ever, and he's like, I forgot what he said. It was something on the Richter scale, but I think big man touchdowns are so awesome, and William Perry is definitely one. So I want to see Colin Saunders add to that. Good question here too. As we're getting close to wrapping down, because again, I want to respect your time. You got somewhere to go. Willie Gay is a lot. There's a lot to be excited about him. But Pete Werner, he got picked on a lot by Derek Carr. I think it was 4 of the first 5 passes by Carr.
3 of the first
targeted against. Yeah, it's no.
You're right. Because it was 7 on 7s, and then the first one,
and then teams. I counted teams, right? And so Werner, I mean, he's a guy that, again, I think he's smart. I think he's talented. I think this is the time you make mistakes. But again, at the same time, the only really bad beat he had was getting beat by Taysom on the wheel route. But is his job in jeopardy? I don't think so, because they're playing base. And we saw the nickel formation today. It's Warner and Davis. It's not Willie Gay Jr. And so I think you're going to see more base 4-3. And that also brings, Alante was in the slot today for those who were, I put that on the notes, but just saw the things. But your thoughts on Pete Werner, anything that stood out or anything that you would say?
Yeah, I'm with you. The past 2 years, Pete Werner's come off to a really hot start, and then it's kind of cooled down over the offseason or over the rest of the season. Demario Davis talked about this as well during his presser, that like the biggest thing that Pete can do to maybe help himself out a little bit is to make sure that he is keeping that momentum going throughout the season. That's the biggest thing, and remaining consistent. I think Willie Gay is going to push for snaps. I don't think that there's a real reality where that's not the case. He's a great guy to have out there on like a obvious passing situation and stuff like that. So like he's going to push for snaps and everything. But I think that like Pete Werner's role is still going to be Pete Werner's role. So I'm not super concerned about that.
For sure. A few questions. Again, we'll just do rapid fire since we're doing chances that Miller and Mims are 2-3 Saints running backs in 2025. It's interesting. I know, again, I like Jordan Mims. I think he has a shot. I don't know if it's something he's got to learn special teams, in my opinion, he's got to be special teams for them to carry 4 running backs, because you're still probably going to carry a fullback with Horvath or Prentice, but Mims pretty exciting. But what do you think?
I still think Williams has a bigger role. I think that like the idea of the wide zone offense makes everybody believe that they're only going to run zone runs 100% of the time, when in actuality, they're probably going to run it like 55% of the time. And so there's still like a bunch of these man runs that you have to be able to do in goal line situations and, short distance situations, and also in all other situations. Like you still have to be able to run man run. So I think that Jamal Williams will still be, I still think it's Alvin Kamara, Jamal Williams, and Kendre Miller in whatever order you want to put them in. But that's the way that I would expect it. Oh, wait, this is 2025.
I was about to say, so what about next year?
Yeah, Jesus Christ. I was just talking about nothing that entire time. Yeah, maybe. Sure. Awesome.
Oh man. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more
Good job,
hilarious stuff
Ross.
to bring to your day. Trey Asfoski, again, I talked about him last week. He looks okay. He looks fine. I mean, I think he's healthy. He's confident. That's the big thing and takeaway right now is he's healthy. Dale asked about the offense. We talked about them earlier again, putting the chapters after we get wrapped up and stuff. And so that will have, you go back and look at our thoughts on the offense. Ton of things to say on that. William Perry had his own G.I. Joe. Remembers that. I remember Sergeant Slaughter for sure. I was a big G.I. Joe fan, more Ninja Turtles growing up. But Tim asks, are we done a safety and free agency? I'd say maybe, but we'll see. I think they're going to add to the room, but I just don't know. I guess the only thing I would say before we do get out of here, Ross, is any things we didn't really touch on, because I feel like we didn't touch on a ton of stuff for OTAs, but what anything that stood out that you want to point out before we kind of wrap up?
Yeah, I think I'll mention real quick that Isaiah Foskey had at least one tackle for a loss today, which was nice to see. Christian Boyd had a really nice day. One where he broke through for what would have been a tackle for a loss. Had another one that I would call like a stop at the line of scrimmage or something like that. And so I would kind of put those out there. And then I would say Derek Carr looked really comfortable. And look for all the fun that Jake Haener and Spencer Rattler provide as a conversation, it's Derek Carr that's got to go out there and win games, right? Like those guys aren't starting ahead of Derek Carr, and so Derek Carr going 8 of 8 today. One of those might have been a sack, but you play through and everything. But going 8 of 8, looking good in the short, deep, and intermediate areas, attacking the middle of the field, as you mentioned earlier, John, and things like that. Like, I think that's one of those things where, like, I get it. Like, people aren't a fan of Derek Carr. I understand, but he's the one that's got to go out there and win you games and everything. He's the one that's got to go out there and do it. And so seeing him be out there and be comfortable and look good and look calm and all these other things like that to me was awesome. So I would highlight that too as like a big thing to take away. 8 of 8, good stuff, lots of motion. Maybe the most interesting stuff that the Saints did today were with him under center, which makes perfect sense. Or sorry, not under center, but at quarterback.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and a lot of gun looks, a lot of different things. And so I think that's the big thing is that you saw a little bit of everything in the offense. And I mean, shoot, it wasn't predictable. I mean, they had motion, they had handoffs, they had running back flips, they had tosses, they had a whole bunch of everything. Like, I mean, inside zones, all those types of stuff. And so I think it was really good. For me, kind of stole my thunder, but Khalil Hudson was probably a guy that I liked today. Had a nice little pass breakup, and you just got enough on the ball to take away. I think it was a Dallin Holker grab on the sideline. And so I'm really excited about Khalil Hudson. I do think that he's somebody that, man, you push for a roster spot. I think he can play in this defense, on this defense too. And so he's one. And I put Monty Rice on there as somebody. These are two names that I think you guys should keep an eye on. Hudson, I think more so, but Monty Rice, he was doing a lot of the special teams work. They lost Saquon. They don't have Nephi Sewell. Monty Rice came in late after being with the Titans. So I think that's somebody just to keep an eye on at the moment. And so same thing with Khalil Hudson. I think can play. I think he definitely can play. And I know he knows he can play. I talked a little in the locker room today. And so I like his confidence. I like his attitude and his work ethic. And so, man, he's definitely somebody to keep an eye on. But oh man, well, this time flies, Ross. You don't have too much time left, so let's just talk and say what's coming up on Locked On. What you got writing, working, and cooking in the lab.
Yeah, I outlined a play that Trevor Penning definitely would love to have back. I outlined why Taliesin Fuanga looks the part, and I outlined how the Saints offense is already starting to show that they have the 3 ingredients that I believe it takes to have an explosive offense. So all of that is in tomorrow's episode. So those are the things that I really, really highlighted. And then just how fun Taysom Hill is, man. Like, we talked about that here too, but like, goodness gracious, just so much fun to watch all the things they're doing with them. What about you, bud?
And then here comes Poindexter talking about his contract, I'm sure. So,
$40 million.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you in a second. Yeah, we have fun. I did get a question from Instagram Live. I don't, which I put stuff on there, but it was talking about AT Perry. Look, I think AT looks sharp. I think he looks phenomenal right now. I really like
I would
AT
agree
Perry.
with that.
He just asked about how he was doing, and so I when we went down the pecking order of the receivers, I thought Equinemius St. Brown looked pretty good today too. I mean, he had
nice
that
day.
one roll, but yeah, he had a nice day too. But I feel good right now, and I think we put that pecking order. It was Olave, Shaheed, Perry, and then St. Brown probably. I think that's kind of what we talked about, or I mentioned him maybe might have put Cedric Wilson, and I said St. Brown was somebody to keep an eye on because he can block too. But Perry's a guy to keep that I think that is going to benefit a tremendous amount from this offense. And as far as me, what I'm working on, there's a spoiler alert special announcement coming on Thursday from the Saints. So keep an eye on that. There's a Hall of Fame person. You probably can put 2 and 2 together, but that is going to be coming up very shortly. And a little bit more from OTAs. Again, we talked to some players, talked to some coaches, and so kind of talking a little bit about that. And so kind of the norm, I guess you would say. Just business as usual until we get to next week at OTAs. And so can't wait for it. Any last thoughts, final thoughts from Ross?
Nah, man. Super fun.
Yeah.
Always. A pleasure.
Guys, we really can't thank you enough for tuning in. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Tell your friends, tell your grandma, tell, them, tell your mom and them, all that good stuff. I mean, we really do appreciate the support. We're pushing and getting in a lot of stuff. You guys have just been amazing. The community is amazing. Saints fans are the best fans. And of course, we live by the creed. We love New Orleans. They love you back. And we love us some New Orleans. We love this place. And so, we want to continue to get this coverage and bring you this coverage. But that is going to do it for us. For OTAs, number 2 in the books. Well, week 2 for us in the books. We'll be back next week. If not before, if something breaks, but definitely by next week. So on behalf of Ross Jackson, I am John Hendricks signing out for another episode of Second and Saints. You guys be good people. And if you're in New Orleans right now, take cover because it's going to be storming very shortly. So be safe, please. As Ross would always say, be safe.
Be safe. Be safe.
Doodles.